back, everybody, to the Processes Track. We are back with our next talk, but before we kick off the talk, let me remind you that we do have sponsor booths that you should please go and check out, but not now, after this talk. Because first, we're going to check in with my dear and esteemed colleague, Joe Glassfield, who's going to talk to us about behavioral science. And one thing that I found out about Joe, which is really awesome, is that in 2004, he was the Pac-Man champion of London and Southeast England. So he's a Pac-Man champion, which is amazing, super cool. I hope to get to play at some point with you. But first off, we're going to talk about behavioral science. So everyone, I hope you have loads of fun. This talk is super awesome. Behavioral science is really interesting. So let's all learn from Joe. Go ahead and kick it off, Joe.
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, no, it's been a long time since I played Pac-Man, but I promise you my PlayStation gets played very often. So I'm Joe Glassfield, as Eva said. I'm a design thinking lead here at Container Solutions. So I'm responsible for our innovation and transformation processes with our clients. By trade, though, I'm a behavioural scientist and a business psychologist. So this is why I talk on these sort of topics. And more on that in a second. If you don't know what that means, that's absolutely fine. We'll go over this. But here today, I'm here to talk about what can behavioural science tell us about DevOps anti-patterns, or what can we understand about the processes behind them. So I'm not going to spend very long on this because I'm sure you've had 1,000 talks about this concept already, and I'm preaching to the choir, but just in case, teams have been started being put together. Dev and Ops is an example of that. You could chuck a bunch more small teams in together and then call them a bunch of different acronyms. And they're becoming more distributed when these teams get put together as well. At its worst, it's presenting sort of a siloed team still, where you've just changed the name. You've started calling yourself DevOps, but it doesn't really matter too much what you're called. You're still doing the same things. Also, at its worst, it can look a little like this. So obviously, if devs think that 90% of ops is now obsolete because they have DevOps colleagues on board, it's like they've brought some weird alien to the party. If you're really offended by this slide, don't worry, I've got it the other way around as well. So if you're an ops flavor person, you can find this one just as funny. Which is cool. But this is kind of what camp entrenchment does to us. It's like football teams, it's like political parties. It divides, it classifies, and it dehumanizes us. And my job is to bring humans back into the equation. So some of the solutions to this major anti-pattern that have gone forward so far, they sort of focus on the what and why of communication and not so much the how. So they talk about interactions as a service, or one team merging with another, and the API that connects the two people together. In essence, they're really focused on removing the human need of this human communication that's happening between teams. And the focus is basically on the problem as it presents itself, with engineers solving it. And this is fine if the endpoint of the communication is to get work done just once. But that's not the case. We're reciprocal, we're complex, we have changing needs as people. These processes won't save you at all, I don't think, but maybe behavioural science will. So what is behavioural science? I call it this, I sum it up as this. It's understanding and using the learnings from psychology, sociology, anthropology, neurology, any of the human sciences that've got knowledge on the end, to understand, predict, and influence human behaviour. Behavioural science is not one set of things. It's not just nudges and biases. Being able to name a bias is behavioural science. It's not. It's about bringing together experts in different fields in order to try and help people change. My personal background is psychology. I'm not a neurologist, so I need to talk to neurologists to understand their field. And it's really important to apply behavioural science when we're sort of designing the world around us, and we're all responsible for that design. Everything we build and shape and touch will have a person in it at some point. And if we don't solve these sort of underlying problems, not just the presenting problem of how a team is structured, then we're never really going to get the change that we so desperately need. So over the course of just another 12 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you 3 ways behavioural science, not the other BS, can help you get your teams to work together more. It's not just dev and ops, it's everywhere within business and everywhere within your life. Let's start with a hypothetical choice. So in this situation, I offer you a box of chocolates today, a small box of chocolates today, or a larger box of chocolates in a week's time. Chances are you're probably going to take the box of chocolates today. You're going to take them because you get something that comes right away. You don't want to have to wait for it. That's also what the research shows. People tend to pick the benefit today rather than the benefit in a week, even if it's slightly larger. But what happens, do you think, if I offer you this choice instead? So I offer you a small box of chocolates in a year from now, or a larger one in a year and a week. Well, chances are you're actually okay with waiting that extra week on top. So your preference isn't defined, it isn't stuck. It actually changes based on this person in the future that you're deciding for. In the psychological literature, we call this hyperbolic discounting, we call it temporal discounting, present bias. You may have heard all of these terms before. But what's actually going on here? It's great to classify it, it's great to say it, but what's actually going on? And why are we okay to wait that extra week when it's off in the future? Well, I think it's actually to do with we just don't really care about that future version of ourselves. We're happy screwing that person over. And we only care about them when they become that present person. And then we want to go after the thing we've got wherever we want it. We don't show empathy to that person, that future version of yourself. I've kind of explained it like that, but I think Mama-Ru Paul Charles actually explains it a lot better. If you don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? Prominent psychologist, Mama-Ru. So that's my first point. My first point is around empathy. There's a lack of empathy for this future self. And if there's a lack of empathy for people who don't look and sound like you, and there's a lack of empathy for people who might be in a different place mentally to you. So how can we go about bridging that gap when I've got 15 minutes or less? The first one's really simple, just asking a really powerful question to somebody else that you work with or that you live with or you care about. This question's really simple. What can I do right now to make your life easier? It shows a willingness to help. It shows appreciation for the position they're in, and that you don't know what the correct answer is. You're not assuming that you know the answer. And people like it because you're asking to deal with the present self problem. You're asking to help them whenever they can. So I view this as a really good, true empathy building question. You could take it a step further. So if you've got time and space to think, if you can stop and think about someone other than you, then you can ask this sort of question. I think this person needs this. I'm just going to go check with them though. So you take the time to step back and have a look and think about it and write it down and then come back to them with it. And it's all about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So if you take that time to step away, then you'll be able to do that quite nicely. This leads us to our second hypothetical choice. So you've gone to a restaurant with your friends and you've asked the waiter for the catch of the day. So you've asked him for the market fish, whatever that is. Waiter offers you, he says to you, oh no, I wouldn't get the market fish if I was you. You should get the lobster. The lobster's 3 times the price, but I guarantee you it's amazing. What would you do? Would you take that deal or would you still go for the market fish? Okay, try a different situation then. You go in, same situation, you ask for the market fish, and then the waiter says to you, oh, I wouldn't get the market fish today. I would get the chicken. It's half the price and really, really delicious today. It's really good stuff, the chicken. Would you take that deal? Chances are you're more likely to take the second deal than you are the first deal, because the waiter's managed to show you that he has your interests at heart, not the restaurant's. So what am I describing? I'm describing my second point, trust. It's all about taking sort of leap of faith and showing that other people's interests mean more to you than your own. Of course, trust is implied between people until it's broken. And then with honesty and working together, you can rebuild that trust. But somebody needs to take the leap first. And that's the point of Rachel Bossman's work around the trust loop. Somebody needs to take it first. And I'm going to argue that it needs to be you in all situations. And it's really interesting as well, because when you start treating people like that, when you start trusting them, when you start showing empathy, you're actually showing something called the Pygmalion effect, which is where when you start doing modeling behaviors, you're able to then get it reciprocated back at you. The Bible was right. Do unto others as you would do yourself. That is the whole point of it. So you're more likely to do things. So my advice here around building trust is don't find win-win situations. Actually try to find lose-wins, situations where their benefits greatly outnumber your own. That will make it really clear to them that you have nothing to gain and that you want to help, and it's to bring you together closer. Another idea, and this comes from the insurance industry to do this around trust. Insurance is an industry that's got incredibly low trust. Customers believe that insurance companies are there to just pay fat cat bankers bonuses with the premiums, so they don't, and they don't want to pay out on customers' claims. So if the customer makes a claim, they try to maximize their return, so they overclaim. The companies, on the other hand, know that customers overclaim, so they're less likely to pay out on the full amount of claims, or they deny more full claims than they should in order to protect their business. So the customers are acting really dishonestly with low trust, and the insurance companies are as well. It's pretty toxic as an environment. But a company have come around to try and to change that. They're called Lemonade Insurance, and they do things a bit differently. They said to the customers, okay, we're going to be transparent with you. Our company needs a flat fee to run. It needs to pay its bonuses, yeah, sure. It needs to pay out claims, and it needs to pay for the operation and the running. It costs this amount out of your premium. Anything over this amount, you pick a charity and we'll give it to them. We don't need that money. We make enough money. It doesn't matter to us. So you can give that to a charity through us. And then what happens is really interesting. Customers don't overclaim against Lemonade, because if they do overclaim, what they actually end up doing is taking money out of their favorite charity's pockets, not Lemonade's pockets. So they're not screwing over the insurance industry. They're just screwing over the customers that they care about. So that's my second point on trust, is that you need to bring in a third party. If DevOps aren't trusting each other, they're not working well together, you need a third party there that both of them care about. And I think the third party in this instance, and I'm sorry to put my design thinker hat on, is the customer, is the user. We talk about sort of value added for customers or value delivered, but really it's just the customer has something that they need to do, and you groups working together are there to deliver it. And whilst you're not trusting each other, you're just not delivering that to your customer. So don't cheat each other, because you end up cheating that third party who is your customer. And I've got one final point, and this is the last one that you should take away from today. It's about being vulnerable. It links together the empathy and the trust really, really well. But you need to find situations where you can be vulnerable. There's some really interesting work into this around something called the pratfall effect. So this is just the idea that if you make a tiny mistake in your day-to-day work and you own up to it, you live to it, then people actually find you way more endearing, and they find you more trusting and better to be around. There's actually a really cool study where they showed participants a video clip of a guy going to give a presentation, to which he falls over on the way up the stage and pours coffee down himself. Another group saw a video where he doesn't do that. And when they got to rating the person and the speaker, they actually thought that the talk was more interesting. They felt the presenter was better and more likable, and was actually smarter as well, which is so weird because it's exactly the same speech that he gives afterwards. So try little pratfalls. It really matters that obviously you are quite competent before you do that, because if you just pratfall over and over again, then no one's going to trust you to do any work with you. But it shows a little bit of vulnerability in order to get something done. So if something happens that's a little unfortunate, put your hand up, live to it. Don't be embarrassed and shy away from those things. So what are two practices that we do at Container Solutions that help this vulnerability? The first one is a ceremony we invented called a dance-off. It's like a retro. We look back at the work that we've achieved, the struggles that we've faced, and we share our learnings of each other. But most importantly, we give space within a dance-off to tell each other why we couldn't live without each other, to give just a very plain and very honest compliment about the last month's work. It's not about what they did, but it's about why, and why you appreciate that person. It's not, John delivered that work really well. It's that John found a way, I found the way that John listened to the customer really inspiring. Thank you for being the first to talk in a room when it feels awkward. It lets me be quiet because I know I can be quiet sometimes, and lets me gather my thoughts. So I really appreciate the fact that you do that for me in the room. It's about being that level of honest and complimentary to your colleagues, because you are not in war with them. You are trying to help and all help together. The other thing that we do is something that's called the Church of Fail. It's an improv technique, but really it's about standing on an altar and just letting out the fact that you failed at something. So everyone in the room listens to the fact that you've done something terrible, or that you've acted in a stupid way, and that you need to let that off your chest. The room is only allowed to clap and applaud and smile. The point being is that when people stop clapping, applauding, and smile, the fact that you are making small mistakes, it makes you hide your mistakes. So we need to get into a place where we feel vulnerable enough that we can open them out. The caveat here is obviously massive mistakes are bad, and the worst mistakes you can make are the mistakes you don't learn from. So if you got up in church every single time and said the same thing, then chances are you're actually showing that you're not introspective or learning. Okay, so 3 things that hopefully will stop you looking like you've brought the alien to the party and everyone could be aliens together. And that's empathy, that's trust, and that's being a bit more vulnerable. I've got a lot more to talk about. I only had 15 minutes, so I didn't have long to talk about this, but please come find me. My facehugger self, I'm over on LinkedIn. I don't tweet, I'm not on Twitter, but I do like to chat. So please come find me. If there's any questions, I'll be in the chat, in the scroll chat, and we can talk about it afterwards. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for the talk. And also for sharing the tools that are just so valuable and that every company can use and everyone can just take to their teams and implement it. So that is really wonderful. I will let you all go now for a networking break because we don't have any more time on this track, unfortunately. Also, we had a tiny bit of a technical issues, which I'm very sorry for. We're working very hard on fixing that in the background. Our technician is very hard at work to get that sorted out so that when we come back for our next talk here on this track, we will be all up and running again. So now we have a little bit of time for networking. So hopefully I've scheduled a couple of networking calls. And there is applause in the chat for you, Joe. I'm just delivering it to you like that. And I will see you all on track number 1 for our keynote. And then after that one, we will come back here to track number 3 for our next talk. So thank you so much for joining us and see you in a bit. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, bye.